So, one of the interesting outputs is the ability to create a pipeline with the best training job. And so, what this pipeline does is that it brings together the raw data pre-processing step or that data transformation step, and then links it with the hyperparameter optimized training job. And so, what this block right here is doing is it's choosing the best candidates and retrieving those models. And it's this actually, I don't think it's done for you, and so you need to actually maybe go back in here and create your own model that links these two. It'll give you the best training job, which you can use to create a model, and it'll give you the best data transformation model. But this part isn't deployed, and so the model isn't actually created. And so this will be actually useful to be done once you selected which training job you want to use. Um, yeah, and I think next we can just this is here is kind of bringing in this function called the pipeline model, and what you're doing is you're creating basically a list of these two objects. These are, I think, model objects in this case, which kind of have their own container images that the transformation and inference is done on. So you then create this kind of link using the pipeline model function, and then you can give it a name and things like that. And so it's important when you're doing this to make sure all the environment variables are transferred. And so doing it in like the notebook, it's going to be kind of inherent because you're bringing along with all these variables. But if you use the Amazon console, you need to make sure that you are actually copying in these additional environment variables that they define, or else you'll get errors. Uh, and so what we can do next is see what the output is. So we can go to the console and take a look at this. And we can see how kind of the AutoML process feeds into some of the jobs that have been completed in the console. So if we look first under batch transform jobs, these will be the jobs that generate the pre-processing. And so there's 5 candidate pipelines and 5 batch transform jobs. Um, let's see. Okay, so here we have 5 batch transform jobs, DPP4, 3, 2, 1, and 0, and each of these transform jobs operated on the raw data. So if we just choose one as an example, um, it will give you kind of the model name, some other interesting information, including the instance that it was trained on, as well as some other useful information, such as the location of the data. And so basically what it does is it creates this folder with pre-processed data, and then divides our data into chunks. So maybe it's only operating on like 10% of the rows at a time. And so what happens is it takes in this pre-processed data and then runs a transformation on it, which is the model, and then outputs it to a folder called transform data. And then that's the data that the downstream model is fit to. Yeah, and so next we can look at maybe the hyperparameter tuning that happens on the models trained on each of these data sets. So we can go to hyperparameter tuning jobs, and you can see this job here is the one that was done for Autopilot. I stopped it early, so it's done 129 of 138 jobs, but we can take a look at it. And so, we can see the breakdown of the training jobs that make up this hyperparameter tuning job. You can see a bunch of configurations here, but you can also see the best training job. And so the best training job is defined by this kind of objective function, and it gives you the score there. You can see the hyperparameters that make up this optimized model. And then you can even see, and so you can also click on this to get to the actual training job itself. Um, and so, yeah, this training job will give you kind of more information about uh, the so this is the container image that is trained on. Um, this is the location of the data that was used to train it. And so again, it's being trained on the transformed data. And then here we have the output of, and so yeah, here we have kind of the input validation set. So there's two input data sets. There's the training and the validation. Um, and yeah, we can see some of the other parameters here. And then the output path down here is where the kind of model outputs to in S3. And so, yeah, we can see, look at these training jobs individually. And so you can see they fill up, they're kind of distributed across in the training job. It's a little bit more difficult to manage, but what you can do next is use that pipeline function to link the batch transform job with the optimized training job. The easiest way to do that is probably in the Python Jupyter kind of SDK environment. Or what you could alternatively do is you could create a model, um, and like say you have like your best transformer model. You could say you could create one model here, and then obviously specify the image, so like, and then the artifacts for that model, and then you can add a container which will have the second part. So the first part would be the data transformation, and the second part would be like the XGBoost model. And so that's how you would do that. But then it is kind of tricky, and you need to make sure that all the environment variables and everything is stated correctly for that to work correctly. But the output of that would be something like this. And so this is something that I generated from the Jupyter Notebook environment. And you can see here that you have two containers. The first container is composed of the data transformation, and the second container, and these are the environment variables. And the second container is the XGBoost model. You can see Sagemaker XGBoost and the training job that it was done on. So yeah, once this is done, once you have this pipeline, what you can do is you can create a batch transform job, or you can create an endpoint and use it to push data to get predictions. Um, you can do that in the Jupyter Notebook environment as well. Let's see if I have the. Okay, so yeah, here this is just some like an example that you can use. You'd have to import Boto3, but essentially what you do is you get the client going, and what you would basically do is you would take maybe this validation data set that I held out and push it line by line to the endpoint. So you would obviously deploy the endpoint. So here I am like deploying the model to create an endpoint, and then you feed it line by line each row from this original data set. And so you need to chop off the headers. So obviously you're just sending individual rows. You also need to remove the predictor column or the target. And so that's what I've done here. And then you need to also recombine it into basically a single string, like a separated by commas. So not like a list or something like that. And then yeah, this is invoking the endpoint, and then sending the data, collecting the responses. Here are the responses, and then doing some downstream processing to get the root mean squared error. So yeah, thanks.